Hello, Cindy Daychuk here with Queen Bee Creations, and welcome to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, hit subscribe so that you keep me coming at you. We try and do at least a weekly video, giving you fun and different craft ideas, sometimes furniture refinishing. You can see I come to you from my shop, so I'm always in the midst of various projects for the store in the front and for resale, and really trying to give you some ideas on how to be able to update some of your decor, keeping it fresh, keeping things out of the landfill, and just beautifying everything. So today, I have been lying eagerly in wait to receive my new Jamie Ray Vintage decoupage papers. And they've just come in. So I have been keeping this big mamma jamma tray in mind for this particular craft. Now, these are not all that hard to find. They're a very popular item. A lot of people like to use them in their decor, either, again, functional piece in the summertime, carrying things out onto the back patio, but often creating kind of decor vignettes on top of either their dining room tables, maybe their coffee tables, or you know where you have the big square, I'm gonna say it's not a settee, it's not a footstool, but you know, instead of a coffee table, you've got that cushiony thing. So often people will use these as a means of having a hard surface to be able to put down their cup of coffee when they're sitting there reading a book, whatever they happen to be doing. But it's not unusual for these to end up getting kind of beat up. They get scratched over time, and then people ditch them. Now, I love that because then I pick them up and I rework them. So just because it's got a couple scratches doesn't mean it can't be fixed up, and that's what we're going to do. And to do that, we are going to decoupage the center of this. And the paper that I've chosen is Poulet from Jamie Ray Vintage. And it is this big, beautiful little farmhouse, hens and chickens, and I'm assuming it's not a turkey, so it's just chickens, I guess, different styles, roosters, some roosters. But it's beautiful. So lovely, muted tones, beautiful blues. It is 20 by 30. So these sheets are awesome because they've got a lot of play to them, a lot of sizing. So I am going to be cutting it down to fit in here. I've checked my tallest rooster fits in just fine. So I'm not cutting off feet, I'm not cutting off heads. And cutting it down to size before I put it in, just so that I save a lot of the excess paper. So I'm gonna end up with a lot of this part up top, and I'm gonna end up with the better part of this chicken down in the bottom here is gonna be left over, some of the tail feathers, which I'll save for another project, because when I'm doing smalls and I just need a really cool background, this will be perfect. So you can tell if you're doing a small project, you're gonna get tons of use out of this. But if you also do furniture like I do, how awesome would this be across the front of, you know, I can see 2 door panels out of this with being a really cute kind of farmhouse design. Way better than my trying to draw this and paint this onto a dresser front. So awesome when people keep creating some terrific tools for me to be able to use, which makes me look more artistic than I am. To get started though, I want to update this. So let me fold this up, and this decoupage paper is phenomenal quality. It's an 18-pound tissue paper, which means it's a little bit thicker. It's not that totally tissue, fine, easy to tear kind of stuff. So it's going to be a lot easier to work with for whatever your project is. I want to give it a good base, and so I am going to paint this white. I will be distressing it because I've got lots of fun little detail on this, a lot of edging that when I distress it, I'm going to be able to go back to this dark color, so it's going to make my life a lot easier. And I'm going to have a lighter base to be able to highlight the decoupage paper a little bit better as well. Bear in mind, whenever you're using decoupage paper, that whatever color you're adhering it onto is going to echo up through it. So if we have a really light paper and I want to just tone it down a little bit, then I'll maybe use a bit of a darker base. If I have a light paper and I want to keep it light and bright, then I'm going to put it onto a lighter base color. Kind of makes sense. But it's the kind of thing that you do have to think about so that you don't have the regrets later, because once it's glued, you're sort of committed. So this first step, all I'm going to be doing is painting it white. And for that, I'm going to be using DIY paint, clay-based paint in beadboard. Supplies, both the Jamie Ray Vintage decoupage papers, the DIY paint, paint pixie brushes, all that's available on the website, queenbeecreationshome.com. But you can certainly feel free to use the paint of your choice, but definitely give these papers a try because they're gorgeous. So no big surprises here. I'm just merely going to be painting this tray, and I anticipate 2 coats and before I start distressing. So 2 coats of paint will give me the solid coverage that I want, so I'll get a nice smooth finish for it before I start doing anything else. So I'm going to continue painting this and I will come back at you once the painting is done. All right, this stage of the project, we have got 2 coats of our DIY beadboard on this big mamma jamma tray. And this next step, just in preparation for where we're going, is just simply to distress this. I'm doing kind of a farmhouse style. So we've got our big chickens that we're gonna be decoupaging in there. And so I do want to distress it back, be able to show some of that black. So I just simply have, and you could use a damp cloth. I've got baby wipes to be able to use, and I am just going to be lightly distressing it to be able to bring out some of that dark underlay. You'll also see me though work some of the smooth edges, and what I'm doing in essence is taking off just those the little high spots from my paintbrush. So I'm smoothing it out as well. So it's not just to distress the edges, but it's also to be able to create a smoother finish than my paintbrush is able to do. But this stage, that's really all that we're doing, is doing that wet distressing and exposing some of that darker color so that we get some of that nice edging happening. And it's gonna add a little bit more interest to our piece. And it's gonna add to that worn kind of look that I love so well. Here we are at our next step. So this has been painted, it has been distressed, it has not yet been sealed. I'm going to be sealing it obviously once we do the decoupaging, and so I'm just waiting for that. Why do an extra step? But you can see already, this looks so much better. It looks cleaner and brighter, lighter than it was in its heavier incarnation. But what I'd like to do is just kind of cut down my decoupage paper before I put all the glue in there, just so that I'm not futzing with all of the extra pieces. And I find that when it's something square like this, I mean, this makes it super easy, and the easiest way to go is to just kind of push it down, square off one corner, make sure that my bottom line is square, and then just score along the edging. So it will give me a nice line to be able to cut against. If you wanted to glue it in place first, you can, and then take an X-Acto knife along the edging. you know what? There's no right or wrong way. It's whatever way works better for you. I just find that otherwise I start getting the extra paper all over the place and it's in my way and I'm a klutz, so I like to make it as easy as I can on me. Often paper will maybe stretch a little bit. So even doing it this way may mean that I have to trim off a little bit of the edging afterward. But this is new Jamie Ray vintage paper and it's 18-pound tissue paper. So it's a little bit more substantial. It's not quite as flimsy as some of the other tissue paper. So I think it'll hold up a little bit better and stretch a little bit less, but we'll see. The other difference is that I am not going to apply it when the glue is wet. We're going to iron this in. So again, I'm thinking that's going to make a bit of a difference. So I've kind of got my loose cut marks on this and I can see where I need to go. I do want them to stay relatively straight, however. So I am going to fold the paper up to make my cuts just so that I'm cutting as little as possible. So I'm looking for where this meets and I am going to assume that the Jamie Ray paper is nice and squared off. So then I'm only cutting half the distance, which again in my head means it's more likely to be straight. No guarantee that my cutting is going to do that, but it increases the odds. Skewing already here. Okay, and I'm going to try and do the same. Well, which way? This way. Coming up this way. And again, also just because I want to waste as little of the beautiful paper as possible because I will have future projects that I can use the other pieces for. And so the less I damage them, the better it's going to work. Now, I think I just did that all wrong. So I cut in a totally wrong spot, which means my paper is way too short. And rather than getting another sheet and doing it right, I'm just going to fix it. So what I did was I cut along the fold line from the original paper and not my fold line. And I could just edit that out, but y'all are going to make stupid mistakes too. And so why not see that? So I'm just cutting along the extra one, the proper line, and we're gonna attach it in. And this is a good mistake because then I'll show you how you match it up. So very often, maybe you're gonna be doing a big piece of furniture and maybe you're decoupaging wrapping paper or wallpaper and you're trying to get it to match, and how am I going to do that because it doesn't all fit, or my tray is way bigger than the paper and I need to add some. So really I just did this mistake to show you how to fix it. So not true. Everybody screws up and I just did. So there you go. So I hadn't cut far enough over to begin with, and I just about did the same thing again, which would have been great. Okay, so it fits. Now, it's not short, and let me pull that down so I can show you. So, this was the first piece I cut, and this is the next piece that I cut. So is it going to fit in fine? There might be a little bit of trimming afterward. We'll see how that goes. But as long as I get these two pieces to line up, it's going to be fine. Seriously, it'll be okay. All right, so putting my two cut pieces of tissue paper off to the side so that I don't screw up any further. The next step for us is going to be applying the decoupage glue. To apply the glue, there is nothing fancy about this. I'm just going to use a sponge brush, perfect use for this, and then quite honestly, I throw them away because I wreck them so easily. If you have a really good sponge brush, wash it out, use it again. I am just using some Mod Podge, and I gotta say, I grew up saying Mod Podge, so if I say that, just know it's because I'm old. That's what we used to call it. I'm just using Mod Podge because that's what I have. It's open, I want to use it up. You could use from DIY, you could use the crystal clear chandelier, so the patina, that would work as well. I have the greatest success when I'm doing the ironing technique to use Mod Podge or to dilute some white craft glue. Just I find that the heat from the iron kind of softens the glue and gets it to stick better. And then I will seal with something other than this. So I don't use it for sealing, but I do use it for gluing things down. And you want to be fairly generous with this. So as much as this looks like a lot, I will probably add even more. And you just want to make sure that you're going from edge to edge. And it doesn't matter if I get some up on the sides because I'm going to be sealing this piece anyway, right? So it just makes it look shiny and, you know, or matte, whatever your glue or your decoupage substance is. You'll get, there's lines that have specific decoupage glue. You know what? Whatever works for you is fine for this project. And again, you know, it can be as simple as just the white craft glue diluted with a little bit of water. That works fine too. I just like this when I'm doing the ironing technique, and I have to tell you, I have not tried the crystal clear chandelier for the iron-on technique. If you do it and it's not sticking, then the first thing that you have to try is using more. For ironing, sometimes more is the better way to go. You need to have enough of the glue to kind of have the heat reactivate. So I just want to make sure that along the sides I don't have any little clumpy bits, but really all I'm doing is smoothing it out, making sure that I've got a nice even coating so that everything's going to stick. And then we let it dry. So I want it to be completely dry to the touch so that I can lay my paper down nice and flat. And whoops, before I get started on the next step. So I'm putting this off to the side. We're gonna let it dry, and then I'm gonna come back at you with a hot iron. This is dried, but it's still glue. And what we're going to do then is we are going to, and I'm gonna do this, sorry, facing me, just so that I can see how I'm doing here. And I'm gonna start with this piece. We know I cut it short, so we have the other piece to go in. But we're just gonna lay this down where we want to stick it. And we're gonna put some parchment paper over top. Now, I don't need the parchment paper to be as big as my decoupage paper because I am going to be moving it around. But what I want to do is just have it as a bit of a protection between my iron and my paper, so I don't burn my paper. I have this on a high setting, no water. So it's just nice, dry heat. But what I'm looking to do is just move it slowly over my paper. And I'm looking to reactivate that glue underneath. Now, I don't always use the iron-on technique. Sometimes I'm just doing the regular apply my paper when the glue is wet technique. But when I want something to really kind of lay flat, I don't want a lot of bubbling in my decoupage paper. I want it to be kind of flat. And because this is a functional piece, that's my preference for this. So often when I'm maybe doing a piece of furniture and I have maybe the backing of a big open cabinet or something, I'll use the iron-on technique because it's so much easier when I'm working with that much paper. I can play with it a little bit better when it's dry, but I get it nice and flat. And you'll see I use this same technique when I did the decoupage dresser. So the decoupage dresser video you could go back and look at. But already you can see, look how flat that is, and that's stuck on there. Now we're gonna seal over top of this, but this doesn't have any bubbling. It's nice and flat. I don't have any problems. I love this technique for decoupaging. You may find that when you go to seal it, it kind of ripples a little bit sometimes depending upon how thin the paper is. But this paper, beauty, has gone on like crazy. It's super smooth, no problems whatsoever. And now, I screwed up again, and this should have been over on that side. So, two big mess ups. This piece would fit over up my edge, and I'm not decoupaging the edge. So, all right, so you know the adage when you're cutting wood to measure twice, cut once. Yeah, same kind of thing with your decoupage paper. Do that, do that kind of thing. So what I'm looking at is whether I can piece in this piece and not have it look too weird and add it in. So that corner works really well to there, but it doesn't work really well elsewhere. So I might want to save that piece. Oh, real life problems, guys. I'm just futzing here a little bit with seeing where on the paper I can kind of match it up a little bit more so that it seems or appears just a tinge more continuous, and that actually looks like a better spot. All right, which means okay, that almost looks like that's supposed to be like that. If we didn't know better, that kind of works. So we're gonna go there, and we're gonna go there. And this is another reason why don't mess with your decoupage paper, cutting it off. Having more that you can fix mistakes from afterward is a good thing. Unless you are one of those people that just doesn't make mistakes, and then you'll be fine. All right. So let me get my extra piece cut down to size. All right, so I have my piece of paper cut, and I'm just making sure that it's lined up nicely, that it's where I want it to be, because I want it to look as seamless as possible. It's bad enough that I've got this extra piece and it's not what it should be. I want it lined up so that it's a lot less noticeable once it's glued down. So you can have a slight overlap if you want, but, and I'll show you this once this part is glued down, so you can see close up what that seam looks like, because you're likely going to have seams in some of your bigger projects. I mean, obviously if you're doing like the backing on a big hutch top or something like that, you're going to have some seams. So you can take a look of what that looks like. Not that it was done by design, and certainly not that my screw up was done by design. Lord, love a duck, I tell you. Okay. All right. So you can see, it kind of looks like it fits. It looks like there's forest rather than having this scene all here. But you can see it really does go flat and nice and seamless. And this is where you just kind of say, it'll be okay. And way better than wasting my paper. Before you seal, do any trimming that you have to, because once it's sealed, it's permanent. And for this, I'm not going to seal it with wax, which you could if you wanted. I am going to use poly to seal it because I want this to be a working tray. You know, we're going to be using it. So because of that, I'm going to want to have probably about 3 coats of poly on it, just to protect it as much as possible and for as long as possible. I do have a couple of little spots here that I'm just going to want to trim away where I didn't cut it perfectly straight. So I just want to remove that tiny little bit. Make it look as perfect in other ways as I can, since I can't make it look perfect in the ways that I already screwed it up. But here's the thing, guys. That's life. And as long as it finishes looking awesome, nobody's going to care. And because you don't tell them. I'm telling you, but we're keeping it secret. You don't tell anybody else. This is just between you and I. But if you happen to mess up, or you know somebody else that does, you now know how to fix it. So it still looks awesome. Final step in this process is to just add our clear coat. And you can do this in a gloss. I'm using a matte finish, but we are going to want to do over the part where we've decoupaged, because this is going to be a surface that's going to be used. I am going to want to do 3 coats. So applying 1 coat, letting it dry, and then lightly sanding it, applying another coat, letting it dry, lightly sanding that. So what I do want to make sure is that I get those edges really well. Make sure that all those edges are down. And I am getting some rippling happening now. Don't sweat it. Wait till it dries, because typically it goes flat then. But we want to get the sealant on there to start to protect our paper when we start to get to the point that we're going to be using it. What I do find is using the iron technique, I don't end up with a lot of air bubbles in the center at all of my design. So it makes it a little bit easier when I'm looking to have kind of a flat surface. And then once that's coated, I'm going to go ahead and coat the rest of the piece. Since it hasn't been sealed, I waited until I was going to be getting the paper sealed and do it all in one go. And then I'll let this dry and do it at least 2 more times. And then I'll show you some close-ups of our piece. So I hope that you give this a try. Certainly with any of the papers of your choice. I'm loving a lot of the Jamie Ray Vintage. It's just a new line out. Jamie Ray Vintage decoupage papers. I do carry them at Queen Bee Creations Home, or you can go on their website to look for a retailer near you. Just again, their design aesthetic kind of works nicely with me, and certainly Their designs are going to play nicely with their stencil line, which I also carry. But you can do this same idea with any paper product of your choice. The decoupage dresser video shows me using some scrapbooking paper that I had on hand. I've certainly done a video as well with some wrapping paper for you, so sky's the limit. What a great way to be able to revitalize an old tray. I love saving things that would end up in the garbage otherwise, and before you give any of your old items a toss, give something like this a try, and kind of put new life into it. It's like having something brand new in your home again. You're saving the landfills, you're saving a little bit of money because you're not having to buy something new. Best of both worlds. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.